Good morning. It is Monday, the 19th of December 2022, almost the end of the year. And this is day 4 of the ANC's 55th National Elective Conference, coming to you live from Nasrec, south of Johannesburg. I'm Adrian Basson, Editor-in-Chief of News 24. And this morning I'm joined by Kylian Mbappe from France and Lionel Messi from Argentina, who both had pretty busy days yesterday. Junior Kumalo, News 24's political journalist, Kunita Hunter, assistant editor for politics and opinion. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
Did you sleep well?
Not really.
Courtesy of the ANC, we had some sleep last night, right?
A little bit.
Just to bring our viewers into perspective. It's day 4 of the conference. The voting for leaders, and I know you're all waiting for that answer, as are we. But that was supposed to have been concluded on day 2 of the conference, right? Yeah. So we are now 2 days behind schedule officially. There's some plenaries that have started, some commissions not very well attended according to the pictures I saw on Twitter last night. But the leadership is what it's all about. This is about the election of a new ANC leadership and that race and everything to do with that. So we are still waiting this morning for results. Last night when we left our studio here at Nasrec, just before midnight, the ANC indicated to us that they are not going to go through the night. They are not going to announce their results last night, and they made us come back here this morning. Kunita, there was a message that went out a few minutes ago from Paul Mashatile, the acting Secretary General, saying that delegates should be here at 9 a.m., but there's not a lot happening behind us here.
Absolutely not. I think there's an effort now to get delegates back in, to get people into the plenary hall so that they can be the announcement of the results and a continuation of the day. Like you said, they are so far behind, they have to catch up time. And the real issue is what we saw in provincial conferences, where once leadership is announced, the leadership election takes place, it's very difficult to get delegates to focus on anything else. And so now I think the most important thing is everybody's waiting for the election results for the top 7, no longer the top 6 of the ANC. And then after that, it's still a very lengthy process of electing 18 people to be in the National Executive Committee. And that's another long process that 4,500 people will have to then vote for.
And Kunita, this conference is ending tomorrow on Tuesday the 20th at noon. That is a hard stop, right?
That's what they said, but I think as things are, especially when I factor in the voting for the NEC, which usually takes much longer, I think they probably would have to extend it by a few hours, if anything. But more importantly, I think all indications show that the party is not going to focus a lot on its resolutions, because this really has just become about leadership.
What does it say to us about the ANC of 2022 that they can spend 4.5, even almost 5 days just on electing leaders?
I think the party must change the way probably its ambitions. Just make it an elective conference where that's all it does, because at the end of the day, that's what eventually happens. We've seen in provinces, I mean in Gauteng, they had to call another gathering afterwards just to deal with resolutions after the provincial conference. And so sometimes, the party sort of help bent to create this image that it's focused on finding solutions to the country. You saw what the commissions looked like yesterday. People barely attended. Once you voted, you went and you celebrated or you caucused. And I mean, let's just take a look, Adrian, of what happened yesterday. The day started with provincial leaders busing, making sure all of the delegates are here. Then there was what they call headcounts. Headcounts are critical. Headcounts don't matter in conferences where the incumbent is going to win by a landslide. Mangaung, it was not really a thing. Nasrec 1, it was really a thing, because every delegate mattered. It now seems like Nasrec 2, the same thing is the case. And so what happened was, just here behind us, there's these open fields where delegates from both sides gather, sort of shepherded by their provincial leaders. The interesting thing in this conference is that you're not seeing all of Gauteng in Ramaphosa, all of KZN in Zweli Mkhize.
There's no provincial blocks.
There's no provincial blocks. And worse still, yesterday you saw leaders who, up until this point, were saying, no, Ramaphosa for second term, Ramaphosa for second term, apparently campaigning the opposite among their delegations and really sticking out their neck for Zweli Mkhize. And so, let me give you an example, Adrian. Limpopo is very interesting because Ramaphosa's second term bid started in Limpopo.
Yes.
You would know
They were
last
the
year,
first
Junior.
people, yes, they were the first people during the ANC's birthday celebrations this year, in the January 8 celebrations. Sten Matabata was the first premier, basically, to pronounce Cyril Ramaphosa as their preferred candidate.
And what happened yesterday?
Yesterday he turned around, but also there is a reason why he turned around, because the CR Renewal 2022 campaign had decided to drop him and support Oscar Mabuyane, not Oscar,
No,
sorry,
Gwede
to
Mantashe.
support Gwede Mantashe for chairperson. So he then decided to throw his weight behind Zweli Mkhize, despite the ANC's Limpopo PEC putting out a statement saying that they still support President Cyril Ramaphosa because its Provincial General Council had decided on
So
that.
it's quite a spectacular split inside the province, Bonita, but as you're busy explaining to us, this head count gives some indication if it's 50-50, 40-60, 70-30, which way the wind's blowing, right?
Yeah, and I think with Limpopo, you know, that statement was very important because that statement was an indication of panic, and it came from the Provincial Secretary of Limpopo, not really the PEC,
Yes.
because some are with Stanley, some are with the Provincial Secretary. And so what you saw was larger, so initially Mkhize had Vembe and Sikukune, two regions, inconsequential. With now the Stanley Matabata move, he has gotten a lot more support in the Mkhize camp, where you could see now a physical ballooning of his numbers as a result of that. Let me give you another province, Gauteng. Gauteng was split, best case scenario, 60-40. 60 for Ramaphosa, 40 for Zweli Mkhize. Yesterday, they had count, 5 p.m., when some of the leaders came to speak to us, said they're counting 350 of 465 for Zweli Mkhize. And why? It's a simple thing. They call it politics of reciprocity, which I thought was just a fantastic term of this conference. And that is, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. The Ramaphosa camp refuse to make way for their candidates. And who are Gauteng candidates? Paul Mashatile for Deputy President, Novula Makonyane for Deputy Secretary General. And so, and it's a simple thing, we go with our numbers. However, in the Ramaphosa head count that happened earlier yesterday morning, the person who led the Gauteng delegation was Panyaza Lisufi. And then on the other side, you had the Provincial Secretary, TK Ngiza, and Lebogang Maile commanding there. So, and I mean, it's an interesting thing. There are no provincial blocks for any of the candidates. Even KZN, yes, KZN, Skuni Soduma and Beking Tolo have whooped the province in line, but there's still a formidable block sitting at the Ramaphosa head count.
And I guess then you can also not say that that head count is absolutely what people are going to vote when they finally get to make their cross. They may attend something for show.
There is that, but I think how things are and how and experience, especially what happened in the provinces up until now, the head count is more than anything a very good indicator of not 100% accurate, otherwise they wouldn't have been voting. But the point is that Adrian, there was no prediction up until the start of this conference that said it would be this close to call.
Yes,
That's true.
yes. And I want to go there. So just before we get to that meat of the result, just explain to us, Junior, the election process. So there's this company called the Elections Agency, which is a private company that their business is to run elections for school governing bodies and ruling parties. I mean, and everything in between. So they handled this process yesterday. Voting ended quite late last night. Gauteng was voting around 8-9 p.m. I think. They would have counted through the night, right?
Definitely. So the voting agency is the one that's in charge of the election, the voting process, just watching, making sure that everyone votes according to their provinces, because each province gets a turn to vote. But another thing that Ule said was that they're not going to vote for the top 7 and then the additionals. They're going to do it all at once.
Is that what
that's
happened
why,
now?
Yes, that's what happened
wow.
now. So that's why the process took a bit longer than expected. So we're not going to have another vote after this. So the voting is going to count the top 7, make the announcement of the top 7, and then go straight to announcing the top 80 candidates that made it. So that's why it took a bit long. But also, right now, we're expecting that the voting, since it has been concluded, now they're just counting the votes and just making sure that they are verified. That's it.
So that independent agency that has done all the other previous ANC conferences has now counted the votes. We expect that they're done because Mashatile has sent out a message to all delegates this morning that they should be in plenary at 9. They're not there, so they're probably still being buzzed in. But we expect the results to have been counted and sealed and ready to be announced in the next few hours, Gunita.
Yeah, and I think what's important is that when they are counting, there are observers that come from the different provinces to watch. You can tell from the mood that people are tentative. People are unsure of how things are going to play out. But obviously, once the delegates gather again, you're going to see, we'll be able to get some indication of where things are, where the wind is blowing.
Do the results leak? I mean, do people, the observers from provinces, for example, are you guys hearing things?
So it usually is not a leak from the actual count, but it's kind of everyone works with these spreadsheets and this. so in terms of these counts that have, remember they constantly. They actually quarantine delegates. That's as bizarre as it is.
To vote.
No, in the sense that if I'm a provincial leader, say I am Babalo Medikizela, I have promised them Mkhize camp 200 votes. From the time they leave the hotel till the time they cast their vote, there's a constant head count to make sure those people, and there's a whoop in line that says you're going to have to vote this way. And so that's what I think is used as an indicator. Like I said, last time around there was some word that the results were leaked as a result of provincial observers having a look at it. But I mean, we as the media would never go with leaked results.
Sure.
And News 24 will wait for the final outcome.
So you're going to tell us what the winds in your ears saying?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So, okay, Kunita, let's go. So we expect results in the next, let's call it, few hours of
this is
this
ANC
day.
time.
Yes, the ANC time. Today, will you commit? Do you think today we're going to have a result?
Absolutely.
On this Monday,
Yes.
which means before midnight.
I mean, there has to be results today. Obviously, the ANC is under a lot of pressure to get that process done. Obviously, there's a lot of apprehension, and the longer it takes to announce results, the more false and doubts can be casted on the validity of the results, and so that's an important thing.
Yes. Okay. So today we're going to have results, and we're going to bring it to you live immediately, first before everyone. Official results, not leaked results. Junior, but I do want us to now talk about the changing winds, as Kunita has explained to us. Because just a few weeks ago, and maybe please explain to our viewers, the ANC announced branch nominations, right? So how does that process work to get a branch nomination? Because in that count, or on that score, Cyril Ramaphosa, the incumbent, at 2,300 and something.
2,037.
2,037.
Which was like more than double the other candidates, Zweli Mkhize.
So Zweli Mkhize had less than 1,000. He had 900 and something,
yes.
right? What's the process leading to those numbers being announced?
So ANC elections, how they describe them is usually they are for the structures, the branches of the ANC. So all the branches of the ANC sit in their branch general meetings, and then they all debate amongst themselves who their preferred candidate is going to be. And Ramaphosa, hands down, was in the lead at the time. But what has since changed right now, hence we're calling it a very close race to call, is that Ramaphosa, the camp seems to have decided to go with people that are his allies. Like, they are not willing to negotiate with any other camp to see if they can negotiate different positions so that maybe the elections go uncontested. But at this point, he has decided that we are definitely going with our allies, which makes sense because for the past 5 years, he has had to negotiate with people that really went in his faction, if we call it.
Can I interrupt you when you say it makes sense to do that? I think it doesn't make sense to do this, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because your core around you of national leaders, those national leaders have no real influence on the actual ground per se. It's provincial leaders. And at the end of the day, you cannot say, because Senzo's my friend, I would prefer him as my deputy. What can Senzo going to bring you from KZN? That's the political dynamic. okay, because Gwede is my friend, he's the chairperson. But realistically speaking, Gwede Mantashe is not bringing you all of Limpopo like Stanley Matabata is. So there had to be a level of horse trading. They refused to do it up until yesterday morning. Then the desperation kicked in yesterday morning in the Mkhize camp, in the Ramaphosa camp, where they realized you cannot have a ballot that has two people from your own camp contesting each other, plus Paul Mashatile for the deputy president position. And again, Adrian, this conference is a succession conference. What does that mean? It means Ramaphosa's out. In the ANC mind, even if he serves another term, this is not about, he's not the future of the ANC. The people who get elected alongside him are the next cohort of leaders who go forward. And so yesterday, they had to beg and plead between Oscar Mabuyane, who's the Eastern Cape Premier, and the Justice Minister Ronald Lamola to say, one of you withdraw. And they did not want to budge.
But just before we, so at this branch nomination process, there was no list of candidates, right? It was names put forward by the branches for candidate of president, deputy, they could put any name forward.
Yes.
So at least there was some indication at that point that the ANC's branches countrywide wanted Cyril Ramaphosa to continue as ANC leader for a second term.
Definitely.
But Juanita, wasn't the big change that he's been forced into a slate here?
Yeah.
Because there wasn't slates, there was nothing at that point. People could put up any names. You had lots of people putting up names, and Diwe Sisulu, etc. Only those who met a certain threshold got onto the ballot. But now, the past few days and hours, literally, Ramaphosa and his advisors, sounds like not very good advisors, were forced into slate politics. And isn't that what costing them?
Absolutely, which is why you saw Tina Joemat-Pettersson being nominated for the second, was it second DSG or first DSG?
It was the second.
First to contest with Nombela.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, Bazima Shalowa said yesterday here to News 24 that what in renewal is Tina Joemat-Pettersson? You know, so I'm not saying that there was no tit for tat that happened in the Ramaphosa camp. There was, but I think what happened is that there was a power block that surrounded the president that was a little bit devoid from reality. I'm not saying this cost the president the vote entirely. You know me, I don't refuse to make predictions. But the point is that, again, they, by their own admission, realized that there were internal blunders where allies were fighting each other for proximity to the president, and as a result, it costed them strategic decisions. I mean, the fact that on the Mkhize slate, they had two candidates for the treasurer position, Mzondile Masina and Pule Mabe. And they whooped them in line yesterday to say, Mzondile, step aside, all your votes need to go to Pule Mabe because you have to consolidate. But on the other side, you had Gwen Ramakgopa, you had Bejani Chauke, both Cyril Ramaphosa supporters contesting the position. Now, the thing about slates are not good for the ANC, and they will come out here and say, you know, this was a defeat of slates. Yes, fine. Slates is that, you know, you delegates are given a lineup to say vote for these people. But at the end of the day, that's what happened, right? That's what happened at the head counts. Guys, vote for Zweli, vote for Pumulo, vote for Cyril, vote for Fikile Mbalula. If people benefit from a lack of organization, it will be people like Ndumiseni and Ntuli, where they had sort of cross-factional support.
Yes.
So there are one or two people that will benefit from that.
So there's an ideal world, which is maybe not the political, but there's an ideal world where slates are terrible for the ANC and where the will of the branches and the party's members are not accurately represented through slates politics, right? The majority of branches wanted Cyril Ramaphosa as president and Paul Mashatile as his deputy, who didn't run together. But then there's the reality possibly of conference and the power of the provinces, right? Who each want something somewhere on that top 7. And it sounds to me, if I listen to you, Quinito, that is what may cost Ramaphosa, is that he didn't play that provincial game very smartly and ended up with old allies and supporters.
You know, in his defense, I understand that he didn't play the political game to the best of his ability, but I think he was looking more into governance. For the past 5 years, he's been forced to work with people that do not side with him, and they have been a stumbling block in everything that he tries to do. When it comes to implementing the step-aside rule, they were up in arms, like this thing is not working and all of that. They were not supportive of him. So I think he was looking at people that would be supportive of all the decisions that he takes and his administration takes. Hence
Is
the
that
sense of
Fikile
Gurus,
Mbalula?
hence the
Mbalula.
Fikile Mbalulas. All of those characters are people that are always behind. Kwede Mantashe, when the president was being forced into a corner to resign, he was like, no, I will protect this office with everything in me. So I think that's what also was playing in his head, that right now it's a do or die situation. I would rather have the people that are going to work with me than to be forced to work with people for another 5 years that are going to make my life difficult.
But I could ultimately lose the whole game.
Yes, I think he's at that point right now.
Konita, it's close. It's close. We're not going to call it. We're not going to say it's one. But judging by the numbers yesterday, the shifting sands, as you also wrote in our lead story on News 24 this morning, it's going to be much closer than anticipated. And even if Ramaphosa wins by 100, 200, 300 votes, that's still a shock. It's still much closer than anticipated. I do want us to talk about Zweli Mkhize a bit and his campaign. And the person of Mkhize. I've received a few messages this morning, I'm sure you guys as well, that talks about hell, that hell may win. So there's this perception, there's a strong idea out there, and I think for very good reasons, that people fear a return to the pre-2017 Nasrec era, where Jacob Zuma and those loyal to him, those advancing state capture, our SOEs in the ANC, etc., will almost immediately return to power. I mean, if I have to force you to just speculate about what a Mkhize presidency or government could look like, where's your mind at?
Let's go back to the Zuma years. The best thing that described the Zuma years was a kleptocracy.
Yes.
Right? It was just free for all looting. The apprehension from ordinary South Africans is that we're going back to that era. I caution that narrative only because what we see here is the split of one faction. It was a faction, this was all one faction before. And so now it's just a split, it's the same people, just people choosing different alliances between the two. Let's not forget that it was people like Ace Mahashule, Zweli Mkhize, who convinced Ramaphosa to stand as Zuma's deputy, right?
Ages ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
And then 10 years is a day is a lifetime in politics. But the point is that there is a real concern for that. The digital vibe scandal gave people real cause for concern around what this man stands for and what he is. But at the same time, this conference could not be the conference of moral high ground because Phala came into the fray. And so this conference is not a conference of ethical consideration. It's a conference of who gets numbers. So let's talk about Zweli Mkhize, not as a leader in terms of ethics or in terms of moral regeneration or in terms of charisma. This is just a tactician in terms of numbers, right? This man started, he was a goner. Last year he was a complete goner. But KZN knew that they're going to have to put up a candidate. And so Mkhize worked from BGMs up until regional conferences. We covered a lot of them. We covered the eThekwini conference. And he managed to support a breed of young ex-youth league leaders to take over in the regions of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. So if you look at the DNA of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal now, very new. And if you look at the delegation, I don't know if you've noticed, Arjan, very young people. That it's not old people. And so eThekwini was a very big, that's the largest region of the ANC, and then it was the provincial conference. So he kind of worked his way up. The problem that Mkhize had, up until literally yesterday, was Jacob Zuma refused to embrace him. And so he did not have, up until this point, the firm anti-Ramaphosa faction in his side. Like Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma had the last time around, or even Kgalema Motlanthe had against Zuma in 2012. He was this candidate that was propped up by KZN, but also within KZN, I mean, we wrote that story about Zuma calling his lieutenants to Nkandla saying, no, I'm forcing you to nominate Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and me as chairperson, right? And so up until this point, he didn't even have the RET grouping supporting him, right? And I think, which is why he was not a serious contender for a long time. Also why the nominations didn't really swing his way. 900 nominations when you are backed by the largest province that has 800 or so branches. Mpumalanga, there was 0 nominations to Zweli Mkhize. What has happened since then is that because he's played into this game of, okay, let's talk. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? That sort of tactician in him, which he's done for Zuma in the run-up to Polokwane in 2007, worked in his favor in that they literally edge support pocket here, until you had a situation in nominations, and I think it was as last minute as that, where the remember, like in Gauteng, Ramaphosa got 45% or so of the nominations.
Yeah.
Mkhize got very little, and then everything else was cut up between Didi Mabuza, Lindiwe Sisulu, Nkosazana. What he did now is he consolidated all of that with the kind of last-minute endorsement of Zuma. So he is his own candidate, which I think is going to be an interesting thing to watch to see. Should anything happen, we don't know. But it was an interesting thing for me to say his campaign was sort of away from Zuma, but obviously with the KZN dynamics, it had to have some effort to appease the old man, or Ubaba as he's known. But it was not the RDT candidate like you wrote about. And so what that gave him is that it gave him a bit of comfort among people like Stanley Matabata, who would not easily swallow an RDT candidate.
No, absolutely. Junior, I want to ask you, isn't there though, I hear Konita on the Zuma, getting the Zuma endorsement yesterday, that picture, isn't it also, is it only a blessing, could it also be a curse in the long run? Because, whoever wins here today is not only the president of 2,000 plus delegates, but will likely be the president of 60 million South Africans. And if you are the president of 60 million South Africans and you are seen to have to get the endorsement of a convicted criminal, as Zuma is, who's on trial for corruption, I mean, isn't there a big danger that could contribute to the further and quicker demise of the ANC, definitely then in 2024 at the polls?
One thing that Konita pointed out is that Zweli Mkhize has been good at playing both sides. Even now, when you ask him outright questions about Phala, will you vote against the president? He'll never give you a direct answer. So
and he abstained. He was absent.
He was absent. Yeah, he was absent for that. So what I'm getting at is that he is good at, even though he might get the Zuma support and it looks like it could be a demise to him, he will later on flip the switch and go against that. He's always said that people that were found to be to have had a hand in the state capture in committing state capture should be prosecuted. So he plays both sides. Like, he's good at telling the broader South African what they want to hear. I am going to ensure that all people who were involved in state capture are going to be prosecuted and they're going to be sent to jail. He's also good at saying that he doesn't want to play his hand when it comes to nationalization of things. He always says, no, we have to make sure that these banks, the land, everything works for everyone. So he does not fully commit. So it plays to his favor. So as much as it also works now. He might get the election in the ANC, and he also will change his tune, I'm sure, going into the 2024 elections. He's going to try and bring everyone in, even if Ramaphosa does not succeed. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm sure he's going to find a way of bringing him into the campaign and working hand in hand with him and show that unity as they go into 2024.
But he said at one of those meetings in Durban, I can't remember if you were there, he made the point very loudly that anti-corruption is now being used to target specific politicians.
Yes,
and this is exactly the same tune we heard from Jacob Zuma for 20 years,
Yeah,
so there's a legitimate fear, I think, from South Africans that Zweli Mkhize is going to use his own corruption case or his own corruption allegations on digital vibes that must still go a long way. The SIU is still in the process of finalizing the process. The NPAs or the Hawks are investigating the criminal charges. That he might use that in a similar way that Jacob Zuma has used his case to weaken institutions of anti-corruption, to weaken the NPA. He's a complicated character. At the same time, he's the guy that we shouldn't forget convinced Jacob Zuma to reappoint Pravin Gordhan after firing Nhlanhla Nene in that famous weekend a few years ago. Konita, I do want to spend a few minutes on a Cyril Ramaphosa victory, a possible Cyril Ramaphosa victory with a small margin. What will that mean for Ramaphosa's power coming back? And can you imagine a scenario where he will be more stronger, where he will let go of this idea of some unity between opposing factions? He's now seen that there is no unity, and that he will just fire those who didn't support him and be a bit more firm.
I think that his allies are hoping for a Ramaphosa who has nothing to lose. The Ramaphosa who used to go up against mine bosses when he was a union leader,
Yes.
and literally go into these negotiations and walk out triumphant. I think that it doesn't fit well that he would have to be constantly negotiating. Why get a second term if you're going to have to constantly negotiate? However, I think there is a concession that Phala Phala has taken an emotional toll on the president. I think that, and it's not the end of the saga. We must not forget the humanness of a man looking at a report by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngobo and saying, "Now I'm out." That I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about a man who has literally been fought at every moment from the time he was elected 5 years ago at Nasrec 1. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see whether he takes it as I got the second term and now the people around me must do what they want to with it, or it's a thing to say, I got this chance, I'm going to be everyone around me and even those who oppose me be damned, I'm going to assert myself and take this party into 2024. I have to say, Adrian, who gets elected with Ramaphosa is very important.
Yes.
That NEC list is very important.
Yes.
So yes, I'm going to be listening to see who gets announced. That is, the president of the ANC, and we're probably not going to hear too much after that because there'll be a lot of singing and heckling and dancing. But I'm going to sit and look at that list because what is a second term if it is surrounded by people who are not fully married to Ramaphosa's vision? But I do think how he opened this conference was very different to how he's been in the last few months, bold. And so if he is going to be the one that closes the conference, because whoever is elected president will close the conference tomorrow, hopefully, one would hope that it is a president that is empowered. And I think that's where the markets come in, Adrian, to say, at this point, business leaders are saying, if Ramaphosa gets a second term or if he doesn't get a second term, we just need anybody who is firmly in charge of this party, because we've not had that in the last 5 years.
A campaign in shambles, not keeping track of slates, alienating provinces, and maybe not wanting to continue as president. Does that sound like a successful recipe to be re-elected for you? I don't know. And on the other side, people who really want that power. Bonita Hunter, Junior Kumalo, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be going out back into the field now to find out what the heck is going on. When are we going to hear those results? And then what does it mean? We didn't even talk about Paul Mashatile, who may be the biggest winner of this entire conference going forward. The silent power of Mashatile. Bonita, I think you wrote a column earlier this year that said the president may be quietly quitting. Is the quiet quitting going to erupt today? We will bring all of that and more to you on News 24. Stay tuned with us during today. And thanks for listening. Goodbye.